Well, and this was when we had one big former ring. Ring around a cabin. And I have seen that happen, you know, for.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. Item D, consider acceptance of a certified staff resignation submitted by THS special education teacher Sarah Foster, effective at the end of the school year. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sussex. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cushman. Is there any discussion? This might be one of those where I oppose it just out of spite.
You have to vote your conscience.
That's right. Any other discussion? All those in favor of accepting the resignation submitted by a THS special education teacher, Sarah Foster, effective at the end of the school year, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. Any abstentions? The motion passes. Item E, consider approval of offering a teaching contract for the 2021-2022 school year for, is that in there?
We didn't have any additions. No, we did not. So there were
No additional, so we can skip that?
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to item F. Consider approval of contracting with High Point Electric for the Torrington High School elevator modernization project in the total amount of $259,725 to be funded through major maintenance. Can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion? Ms. Gates, even though your microphone's broken, is there anything you want to say about this?
Mr. Chair, I would share with you this is a unique situation in that I had anticipated that we would have an elevator company, but this is a general. And we had two elevator companies look at this project, and they stated that they wanted somebody local to be the general, and they wanted to sub under a local contractor. So High Point Electric did submit a bid as the general, and they really went out of their way, in my opinion, in that High Point Electric had two elevator companies come up and look at this project. Because we don't see the bids for subs, I don't know that both of them bid it, but I'm hoping that both of them did, and that High Point Electric has done their due diligence in submitting their bid to us.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion? None. All those in favor of approval of contracting with High Point Electric for the Torrington High School elevator modernization project, in total amount of $259,725 to be funded through major maintenance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes. Item G, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of replacement staff and student computers This is 150 replacement Surface Go laptops for students and 25 replacement Surface laptops for district staff from the Microsoft Store, and the total amount of $157,865.78. Funded through the 2020-2021 General Fund Technology Budget. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Can I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Hager. Any discussion? Mr. Kramer.
Mr. Chair, I can just kind of elaborate on this being a purchase or a pre-purchase in regards to our financial planning for future expenditures in relation to where we find ourselves financially and what we want to do with a plan moving forward on some of these purchases. You'll also see later agenda items that will have that same description in regards to planning for the future of what would be general fund expenditures in later years, but what might possibly, will benefit students in years to come when we're able to have those dollars spent this year and not in future years.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approval of purchase of 150 replacement Surface Go laptops for students and 25 replacement Surface laptops for staff from the Microsoft Store for the amount of $157,865.78 funded through the general fund, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes. Item H, consider approval of purchase of replacement visitor bleachers for the Lingle football field from Belson Outdoors in the total amount of $38,045 from the general fund. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sussex. Any discussion?
Being a person that has sat on those bleachers for about 40 years, yay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of replacement visitor bleachers for the Lingle football field in the total of, from Belson Outdoors in the total amount of $38,045 from the general fund, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Item I, consider approval of purchase of a replacement vehicle. This will be a 2021 F-250 pickup truck for the Southeast Schools Ag Program from Fremont Motors in the amount of $41,424.56. Funded through the general fund non-reimbursable transportation. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schmick. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I believe that Donna Bott is on Zoom and she can speak to the condition of the vehicle being replaced.
Okay. Ms. Both, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
I did not hear what you said though, Marcy.
She said that you could speak to the condition of the vehicle being replaced.
Yeah, it's got a lot of miles on it. And there are times when we haul students in that and we just feel like for it to go very far out of the district, that it's warranting a new vehicle so that it's a safer vehicle, more secure vehicle for travel.
Okay. How old is that vehicle?
It's a 2003.
there any other discussion?
Is there a bid from the local Ford dealer? Transwest? Sorry, Donna, was there a bid from the local Ford dealer here in Goshen County, Transwest Ford?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I could not hear that.
Was there a bid from the local Ford dealer, Transwest?
No, there was not. They have a shortage of vehicles in there. They didn't have one to give a bid on.
Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion? Thank you, Ms. Bath. All those in favor of approval of purchase of a 2021 F-250 pickup truck for the Southeast Schools Ag Program from Fremont Motors in the total amount of $41,424.56, funded through the general fund, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes. Item J, consider approval of purchase of a 2021 Ford Explorer from Laramie Peak Motors, in the amount of $40,995, funded through the general fund non-reimbursable transportation. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. Any discussion? So I guess we'll ask the same question on this. Ms. Bath, if you could explain or tell us about the vehicle that we're replacing, or is there, or if we're replacing a vehicle or we're just adding?
So the vehicle that the superintendent uses now will become the transportation supervisor's vehicle. The one that I'm using presently is a 2003. It's got 118,000 miles. I would feel better when I'm out at 3 o'clock in the morning checking roads to have something in a little better condition.
I guess I'll ask the same question that Mr. Miller asked. Did we inquire with Transwest Ford about the vehicle that they might have in this process?
Yes, I inquired, and again, they were short in that department as well, as far as explorers, expeditions.
Okay. Any other discussion? Right. All those in favor of approval of the purchase of a 2021 Ford Explorer from Laramie Peak Motors in the total amount of $40,995, funded through the general fund, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item K, work session for board discussion on preliminary district budget and funding. Ms. Kate, the floor is yours.
Okay, I have a handout. On this meeting. I'll just take one. There should be one for everyone there. And I'm going to share my screen. A lot of the conversation that we'll have tonight, we talked in detail about when we talked through the funding model and where the money comes from and that type of thing. So what we're going to focus on tonight is the general fund, and that being the largest fund, that being the operating account for the district. That Mr. Kramer kind of provided an excellent segue for me into the first item we need to talk about, and that is finishing up the present school year, the school year 2021. When we talked before, we talked about what COVID had done to the district and how many of the line items that we budgeted for, whether it be activities, transportation, positions not being filled, travel not happening, substitutes not being needed, that created the district a position that we've not been in as long as I've been here, where we're tasked with needing to spend money. And the last 4 items on the agenda tonight tie into that exact need and task that we have at hand. We were able to purchase next year's computers. We were able, with your approval, to purchase those 2 vehicles. I kind of joked a little bit. I came to the district in 2008. Those 2 vehicles were fixtures. I hadn't even thought about the fact that I've been here 13 years and we've been operating them. That, I mean, they needed replaced. We just weren't in a position to be replacing them. So what I have here, and it's the second page of your handout. Our budget was that we were going to overexpend revenues by $134,993. What it appears to actually be happening is that we are going to be underspending revenue by $565,000. That $565,000 amount, that gets us right at 16%. As I showed before, anything over 15%, that goes back to the state. So my conversation with Mr. Kramer and the number that you're going to see me focusing on tonight is 865,000 as opposed to 565,000. The reason why that additional 300,000 is that will put us at a 14% carryover, and it gives us that 1% cushion, if you will. So this is the slide we looked at before. These are some of those things I ran down when I started this evening. We had the benefit of CARES money, helping fund custodial overtime. Several positions not replaced or replaced late after the school year had already started. Transportation, that's a big one, whether it be fuel, whether it be activity drivers not having overnight stay, teams not staying overnight, staying close to the area that we're in. Out of school suspension was reduced. That also kind of changed in what it looks like now versus what it looked like when we were budgeting last year. A change. We thought we were going to have a speech pathologist, and instead we contracted with Tiny Eye. That had a savings there. And then contracting with Banner for OT services versus having our own occupational therapist. That had a savings to it. All of those things right there add up to $800,000. This is one of those sheets that, as long as you're on the board, you're probably going to see this at least 2, maybe 3 times a year. You know, when we go back and look at where the district's been and very little carryover and where we are now, we're in a good position. It's, you know, just like when you do your budget at home, increased carryover means that you have a savings account. But if you look at FY 2021 today, we're at that 16%. FY 2021 end of year, that's where I want us to be when we finish the year on June 30. So $865,000, that's a lot of money. We're talking a budget of $30 million. What do we do for $865,000? Mr. Kramer and I brainstormed, and I mean, two of these are pretty small dollars. We have 2 months left of payroll. Our employees are contributing to the Wildman retirement system. What they have left of their personal contribution is almost $45,000. That could be funded for them. Our employees are also asked to contribute to their health insurance. And that's dependent upon employees are free, employee plus spouse is $22.50, family is $50. That's a month. And then you have employee plus child in there in the middle. Those 2 months is approximately $18,595. Those two add up to just over $60,000. We have in the general fund, and if we did anything, we would do it for all funds, but what we're looking at talking about budgetarily tonight is general fund. We have 293 full-time employees, and then we have 27 part-time employees. Those part-time employees are work between 10 and 29 hours a week. A bonus could be provided to them. I heard that when we talked last time. I think it was thrown out. I don't know if anyone has an option. I mean, this is interactive. If anybody has an option they want to throw out, we're open to ideas. If how I see this playing out, and we've talked about salary relations, but salary relations reaches a consensus, of which we have a few board members on the salary relations committee, but a consensus is reached amongst those members, of which that recommendation then comes to the board. And the board then decides this is economically feasible or this is not, and whether or not it can be acted upon. So if the board has ideas now, we can move forward, we can talk about them. If salary relations has ideas as far as that $865,000, it could be incorporated into the salary relations recommendation. Mr. Kramer and I sought the advice, the request of the building principals. And we had a list of purchases totaled over $2 million. But the hard part is that several of those items were items that we could fund through CARES dollars. So it didn't make sense to use carryover for those purchases. We then went through and prioritized those. Spending, you know what, I didn't even bring the dollar, was it 250, 260 some odd? I don't even remember, I shouldn't even say. Because some of those things were on the list tonight with the bleachers. And the reason why the bleachers came to you tonight was because of the shortage of steel. There's some things that will be coming to you at the May 11th meeting, where it was approved for an alignment rack for one of the schools, the pickup for the ag program. TMS is going to present to you some band instruments. So we shoulder pads, and we looked at the gamut from activities to instruction, and tried to equitably fulfill the needs of what was requested. But
And if I mean, one of the
Mhm.
main components, one of the main identifications for that list were things that were going to be purchased from general fund either next year or the following year. So we can, again, make sure the idea that we're trying to follow is anything that we know that was going to be allocated for future general fund, if we can take that off, the idea then is that that results in savings in those future years on situations where financially we might not find ourselves in this position based on state financial funding.
Thank you. So that's how we finish out the existing year. Zach, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quick, just for clarity's sake, $865,000, is that before the approximate $238,000 we expended this evening?
That's after. That's after.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
That is also after some of the other expenditures that would be coming forward on May 11th. So the 865 is really, we've gone through and identified a number of things equitably around the district that are pre-buying. There are other things on that list that if we find ourselves in a situation where we wouldn't be allocating this full 865,000 to these three bullets that we see on this page, then we could then take another look at those items again and say, can we get those before they have those delivered before the end of June to then go on the expenditures for this current financial year. The piece that allows us to do some work here is really primarily that third bullet in looking at, again, unique ways of salary relations and how it may be different than what we've done in the past in relation to that bonus piece, not necessarily being truly defined as a bonus, but defined in other ways that then could potentially save the general fund and future expenditures that might take place out of a typical year in the general fund. So that will be part of the discussion that will take place during salary relations.
Well, and the other thing to ponder with a bonus is the fact that typically with salary, when you're increasing base and those kind of things, you're looking for something that's sustainable. And with a bonus, it's one time. We don't pay retirement on a bonus. So, there are some different avenues, different characteristics of a bonus.
This is Kate. Surely we're not the only school district in Wyoming that finds themselves in this situation this year. Do we know what other districts are doing, or just out of curiosity?
Other districts are doing the exact same thing we're doing. They're prepaying, they're sorting out their expenditures. They're trying to make expenditures now that don't have to be made in the future. The vehicles, the computers, those kind of things. But there was a huge hope that our carryover was going to be increased to 30%. And when that didn't happen, it creates a hardship.
I think almost every district now, I can't say, because there are certain districts that found themselves in a completely different financial situation earlier than this year based on their carryover. So this might be getting them up. But there are many districts that they were finding themselves up in previous years are looking at these exact same things, trying to find ways in which they can allocate those dollars and make sure, because we do know inevitably there are going to be changes to the state funding model. And so how do we make sure to set ourselves up financially for future years? Because as I theoretically look at, as the superintendent of finances, how can we maintain programs as long as possible? The next year after that. It's a shell game is a negative context many times, but it is. It really is. How do I push this forward to maintain as much of the programming that we currently have existing to provide to students as long as we possibly can without changing their education programming in dramatic ways?
So the good has to be received by the end of June.
Exactly. in order to have it be a current year expenditure, we have to have the item by the end of June, and we'll hold a special board meeting, typically that last week of June, where we approve year-end bills. And so that product has to have been received in order for us to make payment at that end of the year meeting.
So we can like, just on a basic level, like pre-buy hotels for state basketball or something like that kind of stuff could be done.
No, perfect thought process. And that's exactly what, myself, Mr. Kramer, and the administrators, there's a lot of those kind of ideas being bounced around, and I'm saying yay or nay.
Along the same line, the former trustee, Christine Miller, had mentioned multiple times about the potential of contracting out food service. Is there a potential to contract and pay for 2-3 years ahead of for food service in this type of an instance?
When and if we would contract out for food service, we would still have, to my understanding, we would still make payments a month at a time as
So you
the
can prepay a year ahead.
right.
Okay.
I know we pre-buy a lot of paper. Could we buy more of that kind of stuff?
At the May meeting, I'll have a semi-load of paper that, but we only have so much storage. Last month, or was this month at the April meeting, there was a lot of Bluff Sanitary, and custodians were asked to get all of their summer product and next year's paper products. So those kind of things we have been getting those ordered and getting those to where we would have them received and paid.
To your knowledge, has there been a change in that model of transportation reimbursement?
Yes.
Because I'm just thinking maybe we should buy more buses now. If we know that they're going to need to be replaced, if that model's got not so friendly towards us.
Well, actually, transportation actually has become very friendly, as has special ed, in that with the way the bills played out, transportation and special ed both reverted to 100% reimbursement. So we'll see in future years, until it's changed, we'll see 100% reimbursement. I had that exact same thought, Taylor, and the problem is that buses have to be ordered. Like we were ordering January-ish to see our bus in June. But those are all excellent ideas.
So I think the legislature is going to meet in June to go over the newest stimulus package and all that stuff. And I think it's going to be probably towards the beginning of June, but is there potential that could change some of this as well? Just in the fact that we have to have stuff bought by June 30th, but there could potentially be some changes made in that special session that would affect any of this stuff.
I did ask that question last week, and this is more, I think, kind of maybe throw this out, but historically, again, I think we're all in a new world, that typically those interim meetings have not resulted in change. But like you said, I don't know historically if we can rely on that, because we're in such a unique situation at the time that it gets a little bit more challenging. I think the one piece that we do have here is there are some components of this on these 3 bullets too that hold some promise in relation to really allowing us going into next year to benefit from the general fund if we can work together on the upcoming salary relations. I think there's some potential there that will result in some good things for everyone involved, is my hope, based on the situation that we find ourselves in.
Thank you for your feedback, all good comments.
Yeah, And then that was exactly it too. When Marcy and I last week were going through the ideas and thoughts, we've thrown as much as we possibly can and appreciate all those ideas, because you never know when something might not have been brought up in the context. And there's things even with CARES dollars that initially I felt would not necessarily fit into that component, but in reviewing it and looking at some other things, it does. And so those comments and ideas are very important for you to share, so we appreciate it.
So we finished this year, June 30 comes, and we need a budget for next year. Prior to the third Wednesday in July, a budget has to be presented to the board. And in doing that, there's some funding changes that I wanted you to be aware of. Essentially, the external cost adjustments applied to 4 different categories is real close to being 50% of what it was last year. Professional labor, non-professional labor, those are our salary pieces, professional being your teachers, non-professional being your classified employees, energy being the utilities piece of it, and then educational materials being the supplies. We've talked a lot about our ADM, and looking at month ending March, our ADM looks to drop from 1649 to 1577. The piece that does work to our favor is that we're running off of a 3-year rolling average. And so that 3-year rolling average only drops 31 students. That still is a reduction of $564,000. Each student is worth approximately $18,000. And then transportation and special ed, as I mentioned before, won't be capped, at least for this year. Next year, we'll get 100% reimbursement. However, our transportation activities have decreased, and I'm projecting that to be $355,000 less than what we saw in the current year. Lastly, special ed has decreased, and that's due to some efficiencies on our part, but that looks to decrease by $77,900. Those 3 total approximately $900,000. And then the last change, this is the last year of a many-year increase to the Wyoming retirement system. The Wyoming retirement system contribution is going to go up by 0.5%, and 1/4% of that will be funded, but the other 1/4 is unfunded. So when we look at the funding year over year compared, we have 3 different pieces: the foundation guarantee, non-local resources, and then the retirement reimbursement, which is a categorical grant that we receive solely based on the retirement that we're funding for our employees. The foundation guarantee looks to decrease by $900,000 from what we would finish this year at. Our non-local resources will go down. One of our key non-local resources is interest on our accounts, and we're all seeing interest rates dropping. And then the retirement reimbursement, because of that increase of 1/4%, does show to go up. But when you look at what was budgeted, what we actually received, which very close to each other, about $30,000 difference, $900,000 is a lot of money. So if we look at the actual preliminary budget, the far right-hand column being the preliminary budget column, $29,769,687 being the total for revenues, expenses in total being budgeted at $28,932,638. The top several lines are salary lines. And as we've talked through in these meetings in the past, there were a number of positions where we saw retirements or resignations that weren't replaced. Or we've already replaced a few positions, maybe at differing salary placements from where their predecessor was at. So we do have some savings in the salary lines. Retirement and health insurance, that is simply a function of the number of positions and the salary being paid. Bridges or extended day and summer school, that we're moving out of the general fund, and we can fund that with CARES dollars. So that's approximately $150,000, $170,000 that we can use some of the CARES dollars. Food service is taking $75,000 to operate. One of the expenditures that we've talked about is a bus lease that paying off this year and not having any lease payments in the future. So that would be a $0 expenditure. We're just a few months too late, Taylor, but Donna Bott is proposing to receive 2 new activity buses. So that $150,000 is the purchase of those. Hoping to get some DARA money, so we only would have to pay 75% of the cost. An activity bus runs real close to $100,000 a piece. Utilities and models providing $1 million. I'm saying we're going to be right close to $950,000. Building budgets, we look at the number of students in a school and budget based upon their grade span. So that's 536. You're going to see transportation. There was a reduction based upon projected for this year versus budget. But I'm feeling like that maybe COVID's going to slow down a little bit and we'll get back to some of the activities we were accustomed to before. So there are some increases to the transportation. The non-reimbursable transportation, the reason why you see that $129,000, that includes the 2 vehicles that you approved this evening. Special ed, that activity has stayed relatively stable. Technology, you see a little bit of swing in that. The $537,000 for technology includes the computers that you approved this evening. So next year's budget has those computers backed out of it. Curriculum, that includes gifted and talented, ELL. I have increased that to where the budget started this year, assuming that we could have a new person in a curriculum position of some sort and not knowing what kind of curriculum materials initiatives might be there. Operating building and grounds is the custodial side of it. And I'm keeping that fairly flat at $475,000. The insurance, I'll know on Thursday what our renewal actually looks like, but I'm anticipating that to be a 25% increase. And then when you see like Central Board of Education, there was no travel this year. You guys didn't attend state convention, national convention, those kind of things. So I bumped that budget up a little bit. Business, I'm hoping we can get paper this year and not have to pay for paper next year. And then I'm hoping that there's going to be some culminating event expense next year. I've bumped that up and increased the district equipment a little bit. So that gets us to looking at those items. We, if you take our revenues less our expenses, we have a net income profit of $837,000. That's 16.47%. But this is before salary relations meets this weekend. I tried to title this differently because this is the sheet that salary relations always thinks that I've planted ideas in the board members. So these are potential costs. But when salary relations meets, there's always the conversation about steps and lanes and what do those cost. I mentioned the 0.25% unfunded retirement. That's at a cost, $38,000. Our health insurance went up 6%. That's $275,000. And then everybody always wants to know how much does it cost to increase base. So that's on there as well. We're nearing the end. This is an informational slide, and this is one of those that they may implement it again, they may not, but for this year, the total retirement contribution is going to be 18.62%. Right now, we're paying 1.6, excuse me, we're paying 16.49% of that contribution for our employees. Our employees are paying 1.63. So part of salary relations conversation is going to be that increase of a half and who pays for it. But you can see that this was a gradual increase. If you go clear back to July of 2015, Wyoming retirement was at 16.63%. So they've slowly increased the Wyoming retirement system balances. And then lastly, you guys have done a great job segueing into the unknowns. The biggest unknown, and Mackie mentioned it, this session to happen June, July, and the future of recalibration of education funding and what that might look like. The CARES dollars, we know right now we have 80% of CARES 2, but we don't know what CARES 3 will look like or where those will be portioned at. The Medicaid reimbursement was a big bill. That won't actually go into effect for a whole year. So we'll see that 22, 23, but that may affect special ed. And then lastly, the fact that special ed and transportation going to 100% reimbursement. At one time they said transportation may not be funded in 2 years. They don't know. So I'm open to questions, comments, thoughts. It's a unique time for education funding. And it's not pretty, but it sure is not as bad as we thought it could have been when we first started talking about this in January.
So it's a good problem to have, sort of.
Yeah.
In the short term.
In the short term, yeah.
Makes you a little bit wary of
Yeah.
what may be coming, because it just increases that potential fall.
So Mr. Kate, you briefly mentioned this, but I just want to make sure I understood it right. So the other potential cost page, I come up with about 761,000 in those other potential costs that you said were not included in that previous page where we have basically the surplus of 837.
Right.
So, I mean, if we were to insert that number from the other potential costs into your preliminary budget for 21-22, it actually knocks us down to more of a $76,000 surplus probably.
Exactly, and that's right close to 13.2%. Because You may look at that and think, how's she do her math? The percentage of carryover is based upon the foundation guarantee that we receive from the state. And the fact that our foundation guarantee is decreasing in dollar amount, that decreased amount of carryover has a larger effect, if you will, on the reduction side. But I didn't include that total just because those weren't for sure costs. But yeah, your numbers match mine. Other thoughts, ideas, things that didn't make sense?
Had a random question about transportation.
Yeah.
I know it's right now it's funded or reimbursed basically back at 100%.
Uh-huh.
But is Donna, is she in charge of like the fuel side of that? Like the she contract on the fuel?
What we have, and when we talk transportation, there really are two sides of transportation. There's the reimbursable and the non-reimbursable. And the difference is that the reimbursable is all of the student travel. And in a normal year when teachers are going to PD and those kind of things, we do have a fleet of vehicles that's the non-reimbursable piece. Donna, as the supervisor, she keeps our tanks full. We have 3 underground tanks here in Torrington. We have a diesel and an unleaded at Southeast. And then we have 1 tank at Lingle, and then we also have an account at Ty's Pit Stop in Lingle. That when we start to get low on fuel, she requests quotes from all of the local suppliers. And then whoever the low is that particular time is who we have come fill up all the tanks that need fuel. So we don't have like a year-long contract for fuel. We're constantly getting whoever is the low at the point in time we need fuel.
Through the local Westco or co-op, whoever's the lowest bid at the time. So where does fuel fall into the reimbursement side? Is it fully reimbursed or is it not?
For buses, it's fully reimbursed. And we have a couple of white Suburbans or Expeditions, and those are specifically earmarked for student travel. And those, the fuel in those is reimbursed as well. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts?
Somewhat similar to Taylor's earlier question regarding buses, but what is the average age of that fleet of vehicles that we operate? You know, we've approved the purchase of a few of them tonight. I've ridden in a few over the years serving on the board, but are they all 10 plus years old? Are they, you know, where do they fall within that range? Do we know? I assume that Donna's taken a look at that and presented that to you all as well, but just curious.
You know, our fleet, as far as the Suburbans, I'm going to say that the oldest in that active fleet is probably close to that 13 to 15 year range. But what you're going to see is that fleet gets cycled. And what happens is when you see the Suburbans at the schools that are sitting out all the time and aren't getting on the highways and making extended trips, those are going to be your older vehicles. And then the newer ones that they're going to be 5 years or less are what we're going to put people in when they go to DIA and that type of thing. We have a few out here, like technology will take one. And I mean, that one's more than 15 years old, but it gets us where we need to go. And in that fleet is also some of our custodial pickups that they make trips from the school to the dump or to Torrington for paper. That Donna watches that, and her and the head mechanic keep track of making sure that the vehicles are safe and up to speed for our travel. She actually did not come forward with the request for the Explorer. That was my idea, and then she thought it made sense. So she's pretty conservative, but she's very safe.
Is there gonna be any of those other vehicles that might be recycled out in the next 2 or 3 years that we could look at doing now?
The problem is that there's an extreme shortage on vehicles.
Sure.
And the one vehicle that we purchased tonight, it just happened that it was arriving on the lot last Thursday, and they'd ordered it and didn't have a buyer. And the other one happened to be sitting on a lot. But I think we've locally, from a Wheatland to Scotts Bluff range, I think that we've pretty much drained the market.
Was the THS bleachers at the soccer field on anybody's list? Because I can tell you that those, if you haven't been on those are, actually I was gonna bring those up here, those are pretty dangerous. There's bleachers, there's steps that are loose, and it's just an accident waiting to happen. Has anybody looked at that?
That one wasn't mentioned.
On the question of proposed, potential spending that we can use that 800 for, is it your recommendation or the administration's recommendation to discuss a potential bonus in salary relations on Saturday?
My recommendation, and the reason why I like the bonus, is I think that it can be presented. And when I look at what we have for the future, potentially fund a bonus, but not because of the sustainability factor. An increase to base has the potential to scare me right now.
Okay, thank you.
So in conjunction with the bonus, is there any kind of like we did a hiring incentive for the math teacher, the math teaching positions? Is there some options there that we can do to attract some, teachers and that, people here? Is there the potential for that in conjunction with the bonuses?
Yes, there's some things that we can definitely take a look at. It's kind of, we find ourselves in a very unique situation with salary relations coming up Saturday and having still some of these same things. But yes, you're absolutely right on some of those things.
Are there still any positions that we're struggling to fill that?
We do still have a number of positions, and one of the pieces that you will also see coming up is more related to CARES funding and the need then for that funding to be utilized for interventionalists. So we are anticipating even more hires to be made utilizing the CARES dollars in the coming month also.
If there is, I mean, I know there's been talk of like instant tests, like COVID tests. Have we looked at some, maybe purchasing some down the line to assist with?
That is a possibility for
Because COVID
the
hasn't
CARES
gone
dollars.
away.
CARES dollars can be utilized for those purposes if that would be deemed
So it
something.
could be purchased out of CARES dollars.
That is
Good.
correct.
One of the things that was considered a number of, it might have been a year, 18 months ago, was increased security, metal detectors, those types of things at specifically the high schools. Is that something that the administrators brought forward for consideration on that longer list?
That was not something that was brought up, but we can sure check into that.
Zach, I think, Brian, do you want to speak to the metal detectors?
We did purchase some wand metal detectors, and that is all that we've done in that area. One of the reasons that we have difficulty in purchasing the walkthrough ones is that people have to man those, and then that gets into staffing and so on in order to do it correctly. So we have to find a way where we can sustain that.
Yeah, okay.
The other piece with that, if that were deemed a priority, if it fell into some kind of construction, we could probably use major maintenance dollars for that.
I know one thing we didn't fund in the buildings and grounds was the locker room and getting the new lockers at Southeast. Is that something we can get before June? I'm not sure how quickly those would come in, but at Southeast.
We talked about that, and that was one of those where the June date comes up against it, and then not being able to have them actually installed by that time. That's the other piece that's really challenging with these, is installation also has to be completed. And there are some other items too that are hanging out there that, due to a shortage of microchips, there's a portion of some expenditures that we were lined up to do for the auditorium also. That's kind of making it a little bit more difficult to try to figure out too. So it's really kind of finding the right items, the right quantity with the right expenditure amount to fulfill those needs. It makes it a little bit more tricky than what has been typical.
So is that a state rule about it being delivered and in place and installed? I mean, I'm from even with a modified accrual accounting method, there's still some of those things that if you've at least expended it, even if you don't have it delivered. And I'm talking like in different businesses, if you've expensed it, but not taking delivery, you still get to count that as part of your budget, or at least in the current year as opposed to future years. So what is it that's driving that, where we have to take delivery of all this stuff to have it actually count towards this budget?
Our carryover drives off of cash.
So it's
And
actual.
it's the cash basis.
Right, so.
And per governmental accounting, we're not supposed to make payment for anything that we haven't received.
Okay, that's the part I was missing, was it's been a while since I've dealt with governmental accounting.
Sure.
Good idea. I like it. I like your idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was confused. It's just like, any other business could just, when you talk about prepaying fuel or prepaying insurance, you can just make an entry in your books to do it in a normal business. But what is it about what we're doing specifically that?
Yep.
So getting to that point, then, like, back to Donna and the fuel then, so she couldn't contract a year's worth of diesel?
What we'll do.
Without taking delivery of it?
Right. Well, even like our propane, we do contract our propane a year at a time, but what we're doing is we're locking in our rate. So we're paying our propane a month at a time as they're actually fueling up our tanks. That what Donna will do is prior to that end of the year meeting, she will make sure that all of our tanks are full. But as far as, paying for future goods, we can't do that.
So Marcy, if worst case scenario, you send the 865,000 back to the state, how does that affect us in years to come? Or what, does it just affect us for this year? How does that play out?
It has no bearing on future years.
Okay.
And we would not send back 865,000. We'd only send back 565.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just saying, worst case scenario, hey, we got to send some money back. How's it going to affect us down the road? I mean, other than what we weren't able to purchase with that money right now.
Well, and that's why when I look at this spreadsheet, I feel like, the main reason why we're here is because of the students. If we didn't have students, we wouldn't exist as a school, but it takes the staff to educate those students. And so when I think about this, and I feel like if we have money, I'd rather take care of the staff than send it back to the state.
I think we've gone through a year that's almost been demoralizing for our staff. They have stepped up and they have done an amazing job throughout the district. But yeah, I agree. They deserve something for what they've gone through.
Thanks for dealing with the questions too. I mean, you guys obviously did a ton of due diligence on all this to make sure that we covered the basis prior to this. So sorry for rehashing things you guys already talked about.
I appreciate the conversation. Mr. Kramer and I joked, we spent a morning trying to go through and feel good about how we prioritize the purchases. This is good feedback and conversation.
We spent about 5 hours last Wednesday, I think it was, Wednesday or Tuesday, because one of the important factors for Marcy and I is the equitability across the district and how to disperse many of these funds in an equitable manner for all students, and making sure that needs are addressed throughout the district, but then also to do it in an equitable way, because our buildings and situations are very different from each building and where we find ourselves. And so, yeah, it was tricky and unique, and something, I was telling Trustee Hager before this meeting, I've never experienced quite a year that has such dramatic ups and downs. 21 years, I've never even remotely come to this financially where this was even a possibility. That makes sense for the type of year, with COVID and those things, but still, it just creates, this is a better place than the alternative, but it creates its own challenges also. But I think we have an ability right now to do some things that does put the district in some positive situations in years to come that we would not have found ourselves in an alternative situation. And I still think there's some good possibilities there within the next month and a half to set us up in a good financial situation, again, to maintain the quality of education that we've been accustomed to here.
I would have loved to have been on the meeting and seen the faces of administrators when you said, hey, people, spend money.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how they can spend $2.2 million in less than a week. They had a list generated very quickly. So
well, and the interesting piece was that they throughout the last month had been spending down their building budgets because, they didn't know what was going to come and where that was going to be. So a lot of things they had spent or allowed staff to spend that they were having to really think out of the box as well.
And just to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Schmick said, and even taking it maybe a step further, appreciate the fact that you're being responsible about these decisions that we're trying to make. We're not just spending money to spend money. There's a purpose behind all this stuff that we're talking about. And I think that goes a long ways too, is yes, it's a unique situation and we're fortunate that we're able to do some of this stuff, but to do it smartly also says a lot. So I appreciate the diligence there.
I have just one real weird question. I don't know how much it pertains to right here, but, like there's the unknown between the CARES money. We don't know if there's going to be a whole nother program, we're just a whole bunch of unknowns there. Has anybody noticed or thought of, I don't know how to word, but paying super close attention? Like, is there any added stipulations that come along with those added funds? And especially when they add here's another 3.2 million, is somebody looking for, I guess, added stipulations that come along with that money?
That's,
Do you want it or go ahead?
I'll start and you can piggyback.
Perfect, sounds good.
Mr. Kramer and I, in addition to prioritizing the purchases, we met with each of the principals. In doing that, we were talking through their staffing, both positions that they could see using CARES dollars for and or additional positions that they would like to see added to their school. And the biggest thing with CARES dollars is that it needs to relate to a loss of learning due to COVID. So there in particular were some conversations that, we would ponder it, go home and come back the next morning, and either I was in Mr. Kramer's office or he was in my office, and we were saying, I don't know if this seems right, or I don't know that this really qualifies. So, I mean, him and I are really going through the regs and making sure that it makes sense for people to be potted into and expenditures to be potted into that money.
Essence, the short answer is, does it pass the smell test?
I just know, my wife's in the banking and we're in ag, and there's just lots of industries now that there's a lot of money getting thrown around and like that. There's some people are just taking it without fully, reading the fine print on actually what might be going on.
Yeah, what you have to spend it on.
Yeah, little details. I was just curious, like if they did make a whole nother round of CARES, that so know what we're looking at.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
So just a reminder, next week, I think we have the cakes coming, is that correct, Lorraine? Okay, so we need days.
We need to pick a day next week to deliver cakes to the schools.
Next week?
Yeah, next week. Yeah, Teacher Appreciation Week.
You take cakes or just promises?
We'll just take cakes at this point, and we'll worry about that other piece later. We got until June 30 to figure that out.
If you're available a certain day, we can figure what would work out. And if you're not, that's completely all right too. We have the ability to deliver those. Sometimes that's been tradition for some, and if it works out for you, just throw out a day and we can make it work.
I'm available all week, so
Because usually what I'll do is I'll get them all here and we'll label them for whatever school, based on the size of the cake or cakes. And they're here for you guys to pick up and deliver. Someone will do Lingle, Southeast LaGrange, or here in town at transportation.
so is there one, so like for Southeast and Lingle, there's elementary, high school, middle school, high school, so 2 for each.
Yeah. It's easier than the meat and cheese and fruit trays we used to do.
Anyone else interested in?
I could do Monday, Wednesday, or Friday mornings.
I could do Friday morning. I can also do Friday morning, that sounds to be like,
Friday?
Friday morning.
Friday. Let's do it.
so if you're available Friday morning, what time?
I can have them here by 8:30 or even earlier if it works better for you guys. Just let me know. I just have to be able to let Dixie at the grocery store know.
8:30 works for me.
Let's have them here at 8:30 then.
8:30.
Where I go to.
Perfect.
We'll figure out who's taking what where at that point.
We're talking about the 7th of May.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for remembering to bring that up.
For a change.
Is there anything else? Great discussion tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate everybody's contributions to that. And I guess with that, we're adjourned.